For centuries, the Jews lived along the Mediterranean coast of Western Asia, the land of Palestine. The center of Jewish political and cultic life was in Jerusalem, where the Temple of Solomon was located. Now, this original temple was destroyed by the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar II in 586 BC. At this time, a number of Jews were deported to Babylon, while others fled abroad into Egypt, as is documented in the 44th chapter of the book of Jeremiah. The so-called Babylonian Captivity would finally end in 538 BC, when Cyrus the Great decreed that the temple of the Jews in Jerusalem was to be rebuilt, and that all exiles who wished to return could return. In practice, however, not all Jews returned, with many staying behind in Mesopotamia, while others would stay in Egypt. For example, Jews are known to have flourished in Elephantine in Upper Egypt throughout the 5th century BC, and at this place was established a military colony by the Persians. And this city, with its Jewish population, was actually complete with a temple of its own, dedicated to the God of Israel, combined with various syncretistic pagan elements. By 515 BC, the Second Temple was completed, amidst great rejoicing, sacrifices, and prayers. Thus began the Second Temple period, which would last nearly 6 centuries. In this era, Israel would come under the control of Alexander the Great, king of Macedon, whose empire would stretch from Greece in the west to India in the east, inaugurating the Hellenistic Age. But following Alexander's untimely death in 323 BC, his generals, known popularly as the Diadochi, or the successors, were unable to maintain the unity of the empire, and it eventually fragmented into 4 major sections. The Ptolemies in Egypt and the Seleucids in West Asia would play a profound role in Hellenistic Palestine. Palestine in this period would change hands 5 times, at least, between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, but eventually would fall under the Ptolemaic Empire more firmly at the beginning of the 3rd century under Ptolemy I Soter. According to John M.G. Barclay's book, Jews in the Mediterranean Diaspora, the immigration policies of Ptolemy encouraged a massive influx of foreigners into Egypt, who settled in both Alexandria and the countryside. While immigrants arrived from all parts of the Mediterranean world in the Near East, a large number of them came in from nearby Syria, naturally enough. Within this Syrian district was Jerusalem and the surrounding territory. Many of the migrants were likely drawn by economic prosperity. However, though it is variously dated, the 2nd century letter of Aristeas relates the following anecdote from the time of Ptolemy I. He, Ptolemy, had brought his attack on the whole district of Cilicia and Phoenicia to a successful issue. In the process of terrorizing the country into subjection, he transported some of his foes, and others he reduced to captivity. The number of those whom he transported from the country of the Jews to Egypt amounted to no less than 100,000. Of these he armed 30,000 picked men and settled them in garrisons in the country districts. This account is at least partially corroborated by the 1st century AD Jewish historian Josephus in the 2nd book of his Contra Apionem, who relates similar events, as well as mentioning the spread of the Jewish diaspora beyond Egypt and into Libya by similar means under Ptolemy I. For he entrusted the fortresses of Egypt into their hands, as believing they would keep them faithfully and valiantly for him. And when he was desirous to secure the government of Cyrene and the other cities of Libya to himself, he sent a party of Jews to inhabit in them. And for his successor Ptolemy, who was called Philadelphus, he did not only set all those of our nation free, who were captives under him, but did frequently give money for the ransom. By 198 BC, in the midst of increasing internal disturbances in Egypt, the Seleucids under King Antiochus III were able to assert their control of Palestine again. The 1st century AD Josephus relates that Antiochus III himself contributed to the spread of the diaspora when he had 2,000 Jews and their families relocated from Babylon to the regions of Phrygia and Lydia in Asia Minor, in what is modern Turkey. By the time that the Ptolemaic sway over Palestine had come to an end, in many ways Hellenism had already laid strong foundations in Palestine, and the Greek-speaking cities known collectively as the Decapolis had been established in the region of the southern Levant. The struggle between Hellenism and Judaism would finally come to a head in the time of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who reigned the Seleucid Empire from 175 BC to 164 BC. In fact, the first preserved appearances of the terms Judaism and Hellenism appear during this period in the book of 2nd Maccabees. What we see in this period under Antiochus IV is an attempt to bring the Jews under the broader umbrella of Hellenistic culture. A good synopsis can be found of this in the first chapter of the 1st Maccabees book. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people and abandon their particular customs. All the Gentiles conformed to the command of the king, and many Israelites delighted in his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. The king sent letters by messenger to Jerusalem and to the cities of Judah, ordering them to follow customs foreign to their land, to prohibit burnt offerings, sacrifices, and libations in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbaths and feast days, to desecrate the sanctuary and the sacred ministers, to build pagan altars and temples and shrines, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised, and to defile themselves with every kind of impurity and abomination, so that they might forget the law and change all of its ordinances. Whoever refused to act according to the command of the king was to be put to death. In words such as these he sent to the whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors over all the people, and he ordered the cities of Judah to offer sacrifices, each city in turn. Many of the people, those who abandoned the law, joined them and committed evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding, wherever places of refuge could be found. The result of this policy, which culminated in martyrdoms and the desecration of the temple, was the famous Maccabean revolt of 167 BC, which led eventually to Judea becoming united under the rule of a Hasmonean high priest, Simon, in 142 BC, founding a dynasty which would rule the Jewish people until the coming of the Romans in 63 BC. On the topic of the diaspora, the book of 1st Maccabees again provides informative information. Before Simon, under the high priest Jonathan, an envoy is sent to Rome in order to confirm and renew the friendship of the Romans, including men such as Numenius and Antipater, who bring back with them from Rome letters containing the following message to various kings and countries. Lucius, consul of the Romans, sends greetings to King Ptolemy. Ambassadors of the Jews, our friends and allies, have come to us to renew their earlier friendship and alliance. They had been sent by Simon the high priest and the Jewish people, and they brought with them a gold shield of 1,000 minas. Therefore we have decided to write to various kings and countries that they are not to venture to harm them, or wage war against them, or their cities or their country, and are not to assist those who fight against them. We have also decided to accept the shield from them. If then any troublemakers from their country take refuge with you, hand them over to Simon the high priest, so that he may punish them according to their law. The consul sent identical letters to Kings Demetrius, Attalus, Aristeas, and Arsaces, to all the countries, Samsames, the Spartans, Delos, Mindos, Sicyon, Caria, Samos, Pamphylia, Lycia, Halicarnassus, Rhodes, Phasaelis, Kos, Sidi, Aradus, Gortina, Cnidus, Cyprus, and Cyrene. A copy of the letter was also sent to Simon the high priest. This letter is intriguing and important due to the location of the recipients in the cities mentioned, which include cities dotted all over Greece, the Aegean Sea, and Asia Minor, testifying to the extent of the diaspora already in the 2nd century BC. During the wars of the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, thousands of Jews were made captives and reduced to slavery, passing from owner to owner and from land to land until their eventual enfranchisement, or were settled in far-off lands as military colonists by the Hellenistic kings, as can be seen already in the example of Antiochus III we have already mentioned. By the 1st century AD, the extent of the diaspora can be witnessed in the 2nd chapter of Acts, verses 9 to 11, where it is said that at the Feast of Pentecost there were Jews and proselytes from many nations: Parthians, Medes, and Elamites, inhabitants of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the districts of Libya near Cyrene, as well as travelers from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. Roughly contemporaneous with Acts, the Alexandrian Jew Philo in his treatise In Flaccum gives even more detail, saying that no one country can contain the whole Jewish nation. By means of its populousness, on which account they frequent all the most prosperous and fertile countries of Europe and Asia, whether islands or continents, looking indeed upon the holy city as their metropolis, in which is erected the sacred temple of the Most High God. But accounting those regions which have been occupied by their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers, and still more remote ancestors, in which they have been born and brought up as their own country. And there are even some regions to which they came the very moment that they were originally settled, sending a colony of their people to do a pleasure to the founders of the colony. In another work, Legatio at Gajum, Philo reports that colonies have been sent out by Judea from time to time into the bordering districts of Egypt, Phoenicia, and Syria, as well as Pamphylia, Cilicia, in the greater part of Asia Minor, as far as Bithynia, in the furthermost quarters of Pontus, and in the same manner into Europe, into Thessaly and Boeotia, and Macedonia, and Aetolia, and Attica, and Argos, and Corinth, and all the most fertile and wealthiest districts of the Peloponnesus. Among the islands he mentions Euboea, Cyprus, and Crete, before briefly mentioning the lands beyond the Euphrates, such as Babylon, all of which have been settled by Jews. Thus, by the 1st century AD, the Jews were by no means a parochial people, according to the existing evidence that we have. They were thoroughly spread throughout Europe and the Middle East. Philo reports that 1 million Jews lived in Egypt alone in his day. In the book The Chosen Few by Maristella Botticini and Svi Eckstein, the authors estimate that circa 65 AD, there lived an estimated 2.5 million Jews in the land of Palestine, another 1 million in Mesopotamia and Persia, 1 million in North Africa, mainly concentrated in Egypt, and multiple hundreds of thousands in Syria and Lebanon, Asia Minor and the Balkans, and Western Europe, respectively, giving a population total of 5 to 5.5 million Jews, which amounted to around 9 to 10% of the population of the Persian Empire in the East, in the entire Roman Empire. Estimates of ancient populations, of course, are notoriously uncertain, but this gives us at least some idea of how greatly the Jewish population had grown and established itself over the centuries in Palestine and in the diaspora. Thus far, we have only touched upon the geographical spread of the Jewish people over a period of centuries, leading to a broad diaspora across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. We have not, as of yet, touched on the encounters and interactions between the Jews and the Gentiles, especially in the Hellenistic period and later with the Romans. This will have to be our topic of inquiry next time. Thank you for watching.